This is the Yanks Go Yard podcast with Adam Weinrib and Thomas Carannante.
Welcome to a Friday rarity live edition of the Yankees Go Yard podcast presented by Minute Media. I'm Adam Weinrib alongside Thomas Carannante. Clint Frazier gone forever, and he made his departure known this week. We also got some insight into what the clubhouse may have thought of him all along, thanks to CC Sabathia, and what the old guard thinks of him, thanks to Jeff Nelson. CC says he's going to punch someone in the face the next time he reads a Clint article. Well, he better not tune into the live podcast because we do have to talk about it because guess what? It's the lockout, and that's it, and that's all. The only bit of baseball transaction news going on during the lockout, and the Boston Red Sox found a way to make us miserable in the Rule 5 draft. We're going to briefly touch upon it. And the Mets seem to be on the verge of hiring Buck Showalter. If not, they're at least considering it, something the Yankees apparently also did this offseason. So we're getting in a pretty obvious experiment in Petri dish in New York in 2022. Hopefully, I hope they hired Buck. I think it'd be interesting to see exactly whether the Yankees succeeded or failed. Folks, make sure to find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Drop us a 5-star review along with a mailbag question. We'll be more than happy to answer it. Thomas Carannante, welcome to the podcast. Are you bringing your razor to Chicago too?
Yeah. I love shaving, dude. I don't know why.
I haven't done it in a while, but I do love it.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally be a Yankee. I do sport longer hair, but I could cut it. It doesn't have to be too long. I totally love shaving. Big Harry's guy. I don't know what you use, but yeah. And Manscaped, gotta love it, dude.
No, I hate that. I do not like that. I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm getting bored. Maybe that's why I'm shaving more. This is supposed to be the end of the winter meetings. I think it was supposed to be Thursday. We'd have a ton of rumors to talk about and any other conjecture that would make life entertaining in any other capacity than this. Yeah, I don't really have much, and I don't want the news cycle to be dominated by Clint Frazier and older players complaining about him. But here we are. And a lot of people weren't happy with Clint's tenure, whether you think it was his fault or not. I think blame has to go around for both parties. Clint clearly did not deliver on his end of the deal when given the opportunity. The Yankees kind of jerked him around, but we can get into it, talk more about it, because it's not going to end anytime soon. And you could bet that something's going to happen next season. If we have a season, guys, we don't know if we're going to have a season yet. It's not official. But you could bet something's going to happen next year involving Clint to bring some sort of rise to these Yankees-centric stories. And it's going to be frustrating. Why? Because I don't know why we have to keep talking about it. He was one of the prospects in the Andrew Miller trade from 2016. This is a long, long time ago. This is not like it's not like I don't even know what else to compare it to because I feel like there's nothing else to compare it to. It's the Yankees, which are a high profile team. It's Clint Frazier, who was a bit of a character. It was the Andrew Miller trade, which was a very big trade because it helped the Indians really get to the World Series. If they don't have Andrew Miller that year, I'm not really sure what they do. Obviously, they were a good team, but he elevated them in so many different ways. So you analyze all those aspects of it, and yeah, it does lend to intriguing storylines or things to talk about. But now what's resulted from it is just a lot of unnecessary chatter. I don't like to talk badly about too many people. I like to talk badly about some people because it lends it at times. But for the most part, I kind of felt bad for Clint. I never thought he was a match for New York just based on what we knew about his defense coming out of Cleveland, and then the kind of just riffraff, whether he brought it upon himself or not. Drama attracted him regardless, like we talked about a million times on this podcast, the whole Mickey Mantle thing. Not even sure how that whole number discussion even got into the mainstream. The whole spat with Michael Kay about how Michael Kay was talking about how he should be healthy. Then you have him dodging the media. Then you have the weird stuff with Marley Rivera this year, which he was clearly a target in some capacity. I don't understand why. He wore that World Series shirt to spring training too, getting everybody hyped for this past season, which sucked and was awful. So a lot of weird stuff followed him. It's very clear that him and the Yankees were not a match, which is fine. You go through life and you meet people who you're friends with for a while, and then it's like, hey, dude, no, wasn't for me. But now what's interesting about it is because I am sick of hearing about it at this point, but I am not, me and you, not in a spot to really talk shit. Are we going to talk shit about Major League Baseball players? Sometimes, if it's Red Sox players, absolutely. We'll have you on the pod. We'll talk shit to you. It'll be a great time. But former Yankees, I want Clint to go and succeed. I want Clint to have a good time. I want everybody to enjoy themselves. But I also am sick of it. I don't want to hear about how Clint is glad to not be a Yankee anymore. I don't care about that. Don't care about his razors. Don't care about how the Cubs jersey looks on him. Just go out and perform, dude. Like, I know we're celebrating that you got a major league deal, but as Ryan Rucco said on the R2C2 podcast, this was not a transaction of note. This was the equivalent of someone getting bumped off the 40-man roster and re-signed elsewhere for depth purposes, if that. And CC went off. CC was not happy, and he had some choice words about the whole thing. And that's what I like to hear, because if we are going to foster any sort, not we, but like in general, the baseball community, if there is going to be some sort of negative conversation that's fostered or brought about, it should be from players who were in the clubhouse, who knew this guy, and have some sort of a springboard to leap off of. Because us sitting here and being like, oh, Clint's, stupid dives in the outfield, like, what's that all about? Like, we don't know what he's going through. We don't know what the medical situation is, like we talked about so many times. We don't know, if he's having personal issues. You just never know. So CC was in the locker room, clearly crossed paths with this dude, clearly didn't like him, based on whatever the situation is. So I'm not glad that this conversation is still ongoing, but I am glad I do have the negative end of it coming from a source who is well-deserved to speak in that vein, because we have not earned the right to speak in that manner.
That's what's most important to me here. So, I had nothing wrong with Clint. There's nothing wrong with brashness to me. No. I think the World Series shirt is cool. I did think it felt like Clint was a target of the New York media to an extent. I don't think he did a lot to dispel those notions. There's no reason that the announcer should come up with a story about how he asked for Mickey Mantle's number 7 before he came up to the big leagues. There's no reason the announcer should already be, rubbing fans the wrong way on behalf of Frazier. That wasn't nice. That wasn't kind. Now, that being said, he was not a consequential part of the Yankees. Outside of the 2020 season, he was always more potential than realized potential. 2020, he was great for 52 games, and then by the time the playoffs rolled around, he didn't play. We've already talked about this. That's how you knew he wasn't in the Yankees' plans. The Yankees literally went, oh, Brett Gardner's been hot for 3 weeks? Great. He's in. I'm so excited to not use Clint Frazier in the playoffs. And so they didn't. Like you said, from our end, it's just sort of a sad tale of yet another person coming to New York and not living out, the dream that we had laid for them that maybe they were never equipped to. And of course, the injuries are a huge part of it. So we'll never know. We don't know. But what we do know is what the guys in the clubhouse are saying. So I do think the CC Sabathia thing is important, because you have Clint on his way out saying, I'm going to bring my razor to Chicago. Haha, moderately funny, fine. Then Clint saying, I asked for number 7 and it was taken, so I'm going to take 77. That's the first time I've ever asked for that. Haha, also funny. Poking fun at a situation. But then when Clint says, I'm so glad, somebody's like, I'm so glad you're not a Yankee anymore. And he's like, me too, bro. A bunch of laughing emojis. Like, that doesn't quite sit right. I understand why you're happy to not be a Yankee. It's because you're going to get more playing time in Chicago. I understand. And we all know the Cubs are worse than are projected to be worse than the Yankees next year. They might be better. We don't know. The Yankees haven't done anything yet. But, Clint is just happy to get out of an environment. We may never know what actually went wrong in between the front office and Clint, between the coaching staff and Clint, between the players and Clint. But the CC thing gave us a window into it, because CC said, this kid played 15 fucking big league games. I'm done with hearing about Clint Frazier. And when you say that with that vitriol, you're not really just saying you're done with Clint Frazier stories. You're saying you're done with Clint Frazier in general. It's not just like, there's no way CC got that mad because he was reading clickbait headlines and was like, stop writing articles about Clint Frazier. No, you don't want to hear about Clint Frazier because you don't like Clint Frazier. He made that very clear. Yeah. I don't know who else feels that way. I know that CC was the leadership. Basically, he was the leadership council. He was the leadership void when he left. Yeah. To hear CC say something like that, unencumbered, absolutely unfiltered, just get on his own podcast and sort of And Ryan Ruocco is trying to rein him in just a little bit, not a ton, but just sort of tempering it and being like, yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought, it wasn't really a transaction of note. And CC's like, get this fucking guy out of my face. And Ruocco's like, yeah, the contributions were sort of muted from Frazier. And CC is like, fuck this, cuz, or whatever. Like, CC was rude. I've never heard CC go off on a current player. I mean, he was a Yankee as of like 2 weeks ago. And CC just absolutely, the first second he got unloaded on Clint Frazier. I thought that was extremely noteworthy, more so than Jeff Nelson getting Clint Frazier's mentioned. World Series winning 1996 to 2000 reliever Jeff Nelson was also in the Clint Frazier mention, saying, I love the confidence, but you got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Like, didn't do much for us in the Bronx. And then someone else is like, in 2020 he did, and Jeff Nelson's like, 60-game season, who cares? Like, Jeff Nelson being the crotchety old man who's like, you got to accomplish something to be a real Yankee kid is a little annoying because it's been 20 years. I mean, since 2009 accepted, from 2000 to, times, there hasn't really been, Yankee pride, right?
No.
Like, there hasn't been a whole lot of prideful things coming out of the Bronx. Every year the team hangs its head. Every year the team falls short of the World Series. Every year when the team goes down in a playoff series, they usually don't come back, except for 2017. So there hasn't necessarily been that overarching sense of what it means to be a Yankee, because what it's meant to be a Yankee for a long time has been failing in the playoffs. But, so I don't really need to hear from Jeff Nelson. I don't need to hear from Goose Gossage getting Clint Frazier being like, back in my day, a real man pitched 97 games a year, and Sparky Lyle sat on my birthday cake. I'm like, I don't need to hear that. But for CC Sabathia, who's on the team with him, to come out and say, I am so fucking tired of this guy, says something to me. I mean, not just something; it says everything to me.
Yeah, clear personality disconnect too with like the older I mean, is CC? I guess CC's kind of an older generation player.
I mean, he's at least 15 years older than Clint Frazier, at the very least.
And you look at Yankee, the whole narrative of Yankee pride and wearing the pinstripes is, it's about winning championships. It's about going out and doing your job. It's about being successful. So when you have a guy like Clint, who also the people like Clint in a sense are not cut from the Yankee cloth. Like, Yankee players who are really good and were successful here never bought into the negative attention. You don't hear people talking. You don't hear these players talking about, getting called out by the Post or, seeing some BS on social media. They ignore it. Look at, what Derek Jeter dealt with for however long. Didn't bring any light to any of that negative attention. First guy that comes to mind here too, that's cut from the same cloth as Clint, is Marcus Stroman, who is like, oh, yo, dude, I'm the positive vibes merchant, man. Like, all I'm doing is just making those good vibes happen. And it's like, you're also bringing attention to like all this other negative stuff by
Clint's new teammate.
Yeah. They're on the same team. So I didn't even, oh my God, what connecting the dots, man. Just bringing if you want to be the positive vibe dude, like Clint here is clearly trying to make a joke and move on to his next chapter. And then he's going to respond to the one troll who's like, hey, dude, glad you're off the Yankees. While he's getting an outpour of positive, like, for the most part, for like people in media, I think, and people who have been very much in tune to the Yankees for the last 5-6 years, mostly a friendly departure messages for him. Hey, good luck, man. Like, didn't work out. It is what it is. Like, the most scathing opinion pieces at this point that, we've written or anybody else has written was like, this was not a match for a multitude of reasons. Both parties kind of to blame here. And then the first instance, like, either of these guys get, it's like, oh, but this guy's calling me a jerk off. So, like, great. Don't bring attention to that if you're all about moving on, starting a new chapter, being all about the positivity. That's why there's a difference and a clear disconnect here, because CC would never acknowledge any of that. CC would just go out, and hey, that might not be your thing. It's clearly not a thing for some newer school players who are heavily involved with social media and see what kind of a cesspool it is, and some feel the need to respond to these trolls and these people saying negative things. And I guess if you're going to do that, then do it. But the older generation, there's clearly a disconnect because they would ignore it. They would just go out, do what they had to do, and that's that. So hopefully this is one of the last times that we have to talk about this. I don't really feel comfortable doing it. I don't want to have to psychoanalyze why someone's bringing up negative comments. I get called an asshole every day, and I'm a nobody. So you don't see me.
Yeah.
You don't see me quote tweeting people. Maybe I should. Maybe I should start. Let's start. Start today.
Sometimes we do. I mean, I don't ignore all of them. Sometimes I get in the mud with the people.
Yeah, it depends. But like the least inflammatory comment. I'm glad you're not a Yankee anymore. Okay. Neither am I. Okay. That was the one you responded to. I'm sure there were meaner ones than that. Like if you're gonna out a comment, out the meanest one, so you could show like how crazy the world is, and then give a nice little parting comment on the way back. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, it is true though that the conversation before CC went off and before Clint dropped the "I'm glad I'm gone too" was people being like, "Yo, you should give Clint Frazier the same standing ovation you gave Nick Swisher back in 2013 when he comes back.
Weird.
Cubs come back June 20th or whatever to Yankee Stadium." Like overwhelmingly positive, way too much. I mean, Clint Frazier, I will miss him. I hope he does well elsewhere, but he didn't win a World Series here. He's not. I mean, the situation with Nick Swisher, it's drastically different.
I don't know.
So to be, but like you can't even say that it was overall a negative. There wasn't that much negativity. It was people saying we should applaud him like a world champion when he a conquering hero. And so we're probably not going to do that. But I would say we're much more likely to boo Clint Frazier at this point. I'm not going to do it, but I don't think he's getting a standing ovation in Yankee Stadium. It's a prime opportunity. What it is a prime opportunity. You can already see it coming where we will boo him. We meaning Yankee fans, not you and I. We will boo him, and Yankee haters will be like, how could you possibly boo Clint Frazier? He had concussion symptoms. He gave it his all. Yankee fans are disgusting. And that it's just a prime opportunity for people who aren't from here, whose brains just don't work in the same way. The same people who were like, how could you boo Garrett Cole? And I was like, look, I would never do it. But like, do you really not understand why the stadium is booing Garrett Cole? That is shit rock. Like, do you actually not understand why people are booing Garrett Cole? And I think they really didn't. And so it's the same situation. People are going to boo Clint Frazier. It's not going to be overwhelmingly positive. It's going to be slightly negative. And then people are going to come out of the woodwork and be like, Yankee fans, man, what a bunch of troglodytes.
Whatever. I don't care. What I do care about, though, is the Red Sox continuing to affect my daily routine. And it's affecting me because other people are talking about it and we're seeing other things. So I think here is I'm sick of the Red Sox getting in my head for no reason. So now we have the Rule 5 draft again. It's the minor league portion, though, folks. Major league portion did not happen. So the Yankees wasted a lot of time making unnecessary roster moves that they did not have to make. We need to remind you of that again. But the minor league portion of it, I don't know the specs of the minor league portion of it. I don't know who can get plucked. I don't know why they can get plucked, but they do. And there's a few rounds, whatever. Red Sox stole another Yankees pitcher. Brian Keller was his name?
Yes. Brian
Keller. Yeah, 27-year-old, was not good in the rotation, found success in the bullpen, had a very high whip in the minors. I believe that was the concern with him. But a 2.27 ERA, good stuff. Nonetheless, plucked from the Yankees by the Red Sox. And now we're automatically, and we're just conditioned to at this point because of how traumatic 2021 is we're viewing is this the next Garrett Whitlock? Great. Okay, awesome. So the Red Sox just stole a supposed bullpen weapon from us right under our noses, and we're not going to do anything about it. And I know the Garrett Whitlock situation. I know that it's tough. It was tough for a multitude of reasons. I talked about it. I think earlier this week or last week. At this point, I'm kind of losing track of everything. But it was a tough situation because Whitlock had. Let me pull up his stats here because there was like one thing that I was looking at to make sure that this wasn't an egregious failure. Like what was it? Anyway, go on, talk about this, Adam, for a second while I find out what.
My thing with Keller and the thing with the minor league Rule 5 that's different than the Major League Rule 5 Look, there's nothing that can be done to prevent this. It's not
Yeah.
like the Yankees could have added Brian Keller, who had a 1.61 whip to their 40 man just to get him away from the Red Sox, the big bad boogeyman. It just, first of all, it obviously sucks. It doesn't feel good. But the Yankees should be acting as the same level of troll to the Boston Red Sox. This is what bothers me. Every year, like, look, they're in our heads because of the Garrett Whitlock thing, and for good reason. But for the second straight year, you've got Yankee fans shivering at the specter of the Red Sox stealing a random AAA reliever from you. And that's the power of being the Red Sox and getting it right once. If the Yankees get it right 1 of 3 times, the Yankees steal a guy from the Red Sox in next year's Major League Rule 5 draft and in next year's Minor League Rule 5 draft. And if one of those two guys is valuable, then they get a chip of their own. They get a bargaining chip to the pile too. But right now it's the Red Sox running at a full advantage. We've done nothing to them. We took Anthony Rizzo from them for 2 months. I guess that's what we did. And then they were like, all right, we're going to go to the ALCS. We'll see you guys later. Bye. They'll leave you in our wake. Like, we've got nothing. So the Garrett Whitlock thing last year colors the whole conversation. The Red Sox also took Caleb Ort from us last year, a reliever who they stole in the AAA version of the Rule 5 draft, who was really good for the AAA Woo Sox. Never got called up to the bigs, didn't get added to the 40-man. You never heard of him. I don't know if that's going to be a success or failure, but I know that they think they've already got 2 guys on us, and we've got no guys on them. And they took Brian Keller this year in the minor league Rule 5 draft. As a starter, he got his ass whipped. He hitters batted 242, 401, 379, triple slash off him as a starter. As a reliever, 176, 311, 224. Now, I don't know if we will ever see 27-year-old Brian Keller in the major leagues. I don't know that at all. I actually assume the odds are heavily in our favor that we will not. And if we do, it's a short cameo to fill gaps for the Red Sox, innings eater, etc. As a reliever, 25 innings pitched last year, 15 hits, 36 strikeouts. Now, the whip is still terrible. He walked 29 guys in 30 innings as a starter. Yeah. Walked 17 and 25 as a reliever. It's not like Brian Keller is a sure thing, and you can guarantee they're going to be going Whitlock to Keller to Barnes next year. But the stuff did trend up out of the bullpen. The second half made more sense than the first half for Keller. The Yankees had nothing they could do to protect him. No recourse. There is no rule that says the Red Sox now have to put Keller on their roster all year or return him to the Bronx. There's nothing stopping them from keeping him. He will go right to AA or the Woo Sox, and he will do his thing next year, and you're not going to think about him for several months. But right now, in the slow dead of the offseason, this does mark 2 years in a row, and the third pitcher that the Red Sox have taken to bother us, and we have done nothing to combat that. We've made no move to at least go, taste your own medicine. We're going to take one of your AAA guys. You have no recourse. Yeah. We had the opportunity. We took a guy from the Astros who I'm intrigued by, named Manny Ramirez, and I'm as intrigued as you can be. He was a top 30 prospect a couple years ago. We took a guy from the Pirates who was a bonus baby who never figured it out. Okay, interesting. You got a chance to take a Red Sox. Just do it. Take a Red Sox.
Yeah, why are we not responding in any capacity like this? Maybe the Red Sox prospects suck and we don't even want to bother with it. I don't know. I look at Garrett Whitlock and I know that we call it egregious because the Yankees. So I am looking at through the lens of we saved the roster spot for Brooks Kriske, and that snowballed into us losing Garrett Whitlock, who is now a weapon for the Red Sox bullpen. You look back at Whitlock though. At UAB, where he was a college pitcher, mostly served time as a reliever. He pitched in 42 games. 8 of those were starts. 46 strikeouts in 51 innings in 2016. In 2017, 44 strikeouts in 60 innings with a 1.55 whip and a 1.34 whip. Okay, great. Goes into the Yankees system after he's taken. He's mostly a starter. Not overly impressive though. He has one like good combined season as a starter between Trenton, Tampa, and Charleston. But then in 2019, when he gets to Trenton full time, 14 starts. He has a 3.07 ERA, but WHIP 1.29. He only has 57 strikeouts in 70 and 1/3 innings. So, okay, like, is this a guy you protect from the Rule 5? I don't know. Probably not. You looking at those numbers? They're okay. A 3.07 ERA, but a run average of 4.35 per 9 runs allowed per 9 innings. So like, I don't like. Okay, so and then you want to say, but who do they keep? Do they keep Garrett Whitlock or do they keep Brooks Kriske? Okay, you look back at what Brooks Kriske did, and Brooks Kriske like kind of had a really good a really solid minor league career where you're like, okay, we might have to protect this dude. When Brooks Kriske debuted in the MLB between his stints with the Yankees and the Orioles, he allowed 8 home runs in 15 innings pitched over the last couple of years, which is like impossible. I don't even understand how I don't know how I cannot even begin to describe how impossible that is. Then you look back on his minor league career, the man gave up 5 total home runs across 134 and 2/3 innings. He had a WHIP of 1.06, and he had an ERA of 2.34 and a runs per 9 average of 2.74. So and he had 178 strikeouts in 134.2 innings. So that's why I'm looking at it through this lens, because it's like this move should have never worked out for the Red Sox. And Brooks Kriske should have never really been this bad. Maybe he wasn't that good, because not every minor leaguer that comes up the numbers are not translating exactly the way they should. But Brooks Kriske had very impressive minor league numbers for the way that he was progressing throughout his time with the Yankees. And he reached AAA, and he was solid at AAA, 41 strikeouts in 28 1/3 innings in 2021. With a 1.02 WHIP. ZRA wasn't that great, but the 3.81. But if you want to talk about, any type of underlying stats that you might think are positive, that WHIP is low and those strikeouts are good. And then Brooks Kriske ends up being an absolute nightmare. And if you're the Yankees and you're sitting there, you're like, okay, am I going to protect Brooks Kriske from the Rule 5 draft and keep him on the 40-man? Or am I going to protect Garrett Whitlock, who doesn't have that long of a minor league track record? And then he got to AA, and it wasn't exactly impressive, and he only made 14 starts.
And he has to stick on the major league roster all year. So not only,
and he hasn't even made it to AAA yet. So, no. And then the Red Sox use a shortened 2020, 2020 that doesn't even exist for minor leaguers, and then managed to find an Instagram video that they like that convinced them to steal him from the Yankees. So look,
again,
I know we flip out about this, and we are mad about this, and it does sound egregious that they kept Brooks Kriske that long. But what do you do there? Because if you let Brooks Kriske go and he has those stats and he ends up being good somewhere else, and it's obvious, what are you doing? Are you brain damaged? And letting Garrett Whitlock go at that time seemed fine, and then it's duly upsetting because you let a pitcher go who could have been a relief option. Maybe the Yankees didn't know he could have been because he didn't exactly produce in that manner when he was in that role in college. And then it's even worse because it's now the Red Sox. So now this guy's fire breathing on the Red Sox, making the Yankees, oh, you guys regret letting me go. I'm gonna pitch with this energy now for the rest of my life. And it sucks. But we can't be living through the lens where now we think everybody the Red Sox are getting is highway robbery, and we're a bunch of losers. We just have to respond in some way, somehow, and do something that makes Red Sox fans feel uncomfortable, because everything the Red Sox do make us feel uncomfortable.
That said, I'm sure Brian Keller is going to be highway robbery. It's going to be awesome. I mean, there's no reason to think that. 1.61 WHIP, he walks the entire ballpark. Odds are much higher. He's who's that absolute dork? Phillips Valdez. Odds are he's like Phillips Valdez rather than he's like Garrett Whitlock. But I'm sure we'll see the negative consequences of that move soon enough. Just another thing to think about. Again, there's no maneuvers this offseason. There's no transactions. There won't be any for months. The season might not start on time. All we have left is the Rule 5 draft, and all we have there is another Red Sox going, checkmate. People keep saying the Yankees are making no moves, neither are the Red Sox. Again, the Red Sox made 4 moves. We've made 0. And then here we are, the Yankees entering the Rule 5. We got Manny Ramirez from the Astros. Maybe we thought that was revenge. We thought we're like, oh, you're going to take Brian Keller? We'll take Manny Ramirez. And the Red Sox were like, It's like the Don Draper, I don't think about you at all thing. It's like, how do you feel about that? We have our own Manny Ramirez. And the Red Sox are like, we don't care. What are you talking about? He's an Astros prospect. You helped us too. You got rid of the Astros prospect. Like, okay. Yeah. Yankees so stupid. So let's talk about the Mets and their managerial search. This could end any second now, but I do just want to get the conversation in before it's done. I have never gotten on a high horse and said the Yankees had to hire Buck Showalter. They must hire Buck Showalter. I don't know. There's a lot of evidence for Buck Showalter's teams getting better after he leaves. it might be a difficult veer from new school Aaron Boone, who's so new school that the front office makes all of his lineups for him, to old school Buck Showalter. That is one hell of a pivot. And it's the kind of thing that only really makes sense to Yankee fans in the middle of a fever dream when you're like, this is the worst team that ever lived. Change everything. Like, go full Costanza. Everything the opposite. Do like, look, if you're going to go, instead of Boone, Showalter, instead of pinstripes, do full blue uniforms with white pinstripes. Like, it's you're living in a world where you're changing absolutely everything. It's make Anthony Rizzo bat right-handed. Like, in a crazy universe, Buck Showalter kind of makes sense. I was never definitely standing on a soapbox being like, it must be Buck Showalter, repent. But it's something to think about. And in your darkest moments, you're definitely like, man, Buck would really get after these guys instead of Aaron Boone, who does nothing. Cut to the Mets, who are searching for their manager, and they seem quite likely to hire Buck Showalter. It's not a done deal yet, but the leaks are that, I mean, obviously he's one of the favorites, along with Joe Espada, and they're interviewing a bunch of other dudes. But Max Scherzer advocated for Buck Showalter. And all of this is to say that we're going to very quickly find out, it would seem, whether hiring Buck Showalter is an insane culture killer or a stroke of genius. I think it's likely to be somewhere in between. There's no reason to think Buck Showalter is Tony La Russa, who, by the way, did get his team to the playoffs. It's not like Tony La Russa's existence knocked the White Sox out of the Central race. They still won the Central. Tim Anderson beefed with Tony La Russa. I don't think it was a good situation. The optics sucked. Tony La Russa's also had a bunch of DUIs and has had, racially insensitive comments towards black players. I mean, Buck Showalter has none of those things. Buck Showalter just is old. So a lot of young people on Twitter are looking at it being like, Showalter, Schmowalter, like, basically Tony La Russa. And remember that time he left Zach Britton in the bullpen on the road in Toronto in the wildcard game? Yeah, I remember. But he also had like a 40-year career before that. So every child on Twitter is like, remember the one thing? Don't you remember that one thing? Isn't that one thing completely disqualifying? No, not really. I would be interested in what happens between Buck and the Mets, but all that really matters to us is that, according to this week's reports, there was a moment of zen in the Yankees front office too, where they felt the same way, and where Hal Steinbrenner was at least briefly considering hitting the Buck button before he finally decided to listen to Brian Cashman's recommendation and bring Aaron Boone back. Of course, that was Brian Cashman's recommendation. Brian Cashman doesn't want any boats rocked, because if the boat gets rocked enough, Brian Cashman's contract is up after this season. So if the boat gets rocked, odds are high he gets rocked out of the boat and into the water along with it. Hilarious that Brian Cashman recommended. Like, of course, yeah. Oh, great recommendation. You want to bring back the guy whose legacy is attached to your name? Okay, yeah. Smart recommendation. But Hal Steinbrenner ultimately did listen to Brian Cashman. Steve Cohen might do what Hal Steinbrenner was mulling over at the end of the season and hire Buck Showalter. So if you want to say there's no way Buck would work in the modern game, and you want to say he blew his life's work in 2015 when he left Zach Britton in the bullpen too long, or if you want to say Buck is toxic and the big city isn't for him and the modern game in the big city is a disastrous pairing, you can say all those things. You have a Twitter account. We have the right to free speech. We have all of these things. But we're going to get a pretty clear A versus B experiment. We're putting them both in the Petri dish in New York. That's why I want to see Buck Showalter get hired by the Mets, so that you have Aaron Boone, New York Yankees, Buck Showalter, New York Mets, same city, same conditions, almost the same payroll, same lockout restrictions, tough spring training. Go. Both of you people, go. Strong rosters. Mets roster is good. Yankees roster is theoretically good, maybe a little bit worse. Pretty close. But they're going to be in almost identical conditions when the season opens. We'll literally get to see, across town. Would it have made us worse to have hired Buck Showalter, or did we make the wrong call here? And that's why I want to see it happen.
I want to see it happen too. You also just gave the Yankees front office credit. Don't give the Yankees front office credit. You said that the front office mulled this over. I don't think the front office mulled it over. I think Hal Steinbrenner was like, dude, we need a goddamn change. And the front office is like, no, dude, we're going to keep funneling our information down to Aaron Boone, and that's how we're going to do business, Hal. Mm-hmm. How do I view this? Happy for the Mets fans, if this is what Mets fans want. Happy for you guys. Want everybody. I want the city buzzing with baseball electricity. I don't care how that's going to happen. It's better when everybody is better. It's not fun when teams are miserable. We are Knicks fans. We know how miserable it is during the wintertime when the Knicks are bad. City's dead. Not fun.
Currently.
So yeah, currently we're treading water. So it's
the
like
king of 500 teams, the ultimate
Yeah.
500 team. There's never been a more 500 team than the Knicks.
But I view managers like, do I think Buck Showalter would have elevated the Yankees to a place that we've never even seen before? No, I just think like some instinctual decision making would really help this Yankees team. And I think Buck Showalter probably has that, being of the older school management style. I don't think the game needs a complete rework. I think the game needs an injection of everything. When you combine old practices with new ones, that's how you get the best results. And we seem to look, we live in an era where front offices dictate everything you do. The Rays, I mean, you could even say the same for the Dodgers. And like, look at that. Do you think Dave Roberts is a bad manager? I don't. I think Dave Roberts has baseball instincts. He's a former player.
Yeah.
I've listened to his post game and pregame talks. He knows the game. I don't doubt anything. A lot of Dodgers fans hate Dave Roberts. Dave Roberts has the best winning percentage of any Dodgers manager in history. So fans are going to hate managers regardless of what the outcome is. The Dodgers just won a World Series in 2020. Fans were up in arms after that Game 4 loss and wanted to kill Dave Roberts for what? Because who dropped that ball? Who made Will Smith
Brett
dropped
Phillips.
the ball? Yeah, Brett Phillips somehow hit a single off of Kenley Jansen, and then Max Muncy decided to rifle the ball 100 miles an hour from 3 feet away to Will Smith, who then dropped it. So like, that's Dave Roberts' fault? No, when we're talking at fault for managers, we're talking about pitching decisions. Why should Kenley Jansen not be in the game as the closer in that time period? It absolutely should happen. So fans are always going to be mad at managers. What I'm trying to say here is, yes, I agree with what you're saying. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's not going to be a disaster. It's definitely not going to be a stroke of genius. If you put anybody in there with any sort of baseball experience or baseball know-how, they're going to be able to manage a good team. We just saw what Aaron Boone did from 2017 to 2019. He managed a team on autopilot, or 2018 and 2019. He managed a team on autopilot to 103 and 100 wins. So it's clear that if you have a good roster, if you can formulate a lineup card, if you have any idea of when to pull a pitcher, the team for the most part is going to do well. What we need is the instinct in must-win games against opponents who have the mental edge over us and continue to punk us over and over and over again. And we need that sort of gumption in that real time to put this Yankees team over the edge. So would Buck Showalter have done that? I am confident he would have been able to do that better than Aaron Boone, but you just never know. I hope it works out. If this is what's going to happen with the Mets, I hope it works out. I think these are two very different rosters, so managing the expectations here. If Buck Showalter does well with the Mets, I don't think that necessarily means he does well with the Yankees and vice versa. If you have a starting rotation of Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, makes life a little bit easier for bullpen management. So yeah, if Aaron Boone had Jacob deGrom and Garrett Cole, yeah, I think we're talking about a little bit. His life is a little bit more alleviated in terms of the decision making that he's going to have to make on a daily basis with the bullpen, with the starting rotation. So there's a lot of things that go into this. I, for one, am kind of glad that this was a consideration for Hal, if it's true, because then you know that the questions about this team are reaching the highest possible point where that decision making should theoretically trickle down. So yeah, Brian Cashman's contract expires at the end of this year. Maybe Hal was like, all right, dude, if we sign Boone and we have a disappointing season next year and Buck Showalter goes elsewhere and proves them wrong, you're out. Maybe that was the discussion. Who knows? It'd be intriguing if it was. I'd like to hear something like that. A little bit, accountability and responsibility for decision making, because bringing back Aaron Boone for the amount of time they gave him on the contract doesn't really matter because they could fire him at any time. But it sent a bizarre message because there was a lot of underachieving over the last 2.5 years. I think I agree. It's somewhere in the middle. Met fans are going to be, if Buck Showalter goes to the Mets, there will be a point in time where we'll just screenshot Twitter and there will be a lot of shit talking on Buck Showalter. Maybe he took DeGrom out an inning too early. Maybe he didn't let Max go into the 9th when he was feeling it. Maybe he made the wrong bullpen decision because the Mets bullpen is a disaster anyway, so I don't know who's going to properly manage that. It'll come. Something's going to happen. we're talking about it now because the anticipation here is fun. Ooh, Mets, Max Scherzer, Starling Marte, new manager. We're injecting new life into this team. Let's go. When reality strikes, ball games start to be played, decisions start to be made that you don't necessarily agree with. It's all going to flip over. It's all going to be a different discussion. So, I'll tell you what, though, I'm pretty optimistic we'll be having the same discussions that we have with Aaron Boone over the last few years. So that's not going to change.
Nope. I do think there's also a world where they hire Buck Showalter, and by June, you've got this fledgling Mets analytics department that's like in his head.
Maybe.
And he lose some game in June. You're like, and you hear the post game, he's like, well, you gotta ask the analytics department about that. I don't know why we took Taiwan out in the fifth. You're gonna have to talk to wait till the analytics department gets here. We'll have that conversation. Like, it could go very poorly. I don't know, but you're right. The luxury of DeGrom and Scherzer, it's kind of like any playoff series he wins, he could just win the first two games 6-0 and 8-2 or whatever. You never know. But man, maybe if the Yankees had hired Buck Showalter the last couple of years, maybe he would have found a way to forget to put Aroldis Chapman in a playoff game. We actually would have won some of those do or dies. Imagine if we had Aroldis instead of Zach Britton, and he was just leaving Aroldis Chapman in the bullpen in the wild card game on the road. Would have been epic. It would have been epic. Maybe that mistake would have helped. But that is it for this edition of the Yanks Go Yard podcast. Make sure to find us, folks, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. YouTube live 2:00 Eastern time, Mondays and Thursdays during the offseason lockout. We will hopefully return to a more regular 3 times a week rotation when the season comes back in 2025, because I don't think we're getting a season this year. You can find us on Twitter at the address is listed on your screen right now, at Adam Weinrib. For me, Thomas Carannante, where can they find you?
At Tommy's_takes, if you could see it right there.
Right there.
Great talking to you guys. Please head on over to yanksguard.com. We've been loving the support this last year. Adam has a nice article up there predicting the moves that the Yankees will make at 4 key positions where there's very clear vacancies. Some of them might not be what you expect either. So we got a lot of stuff coming out for you, even though it's a lockout, a lot of different ideas. We're trying hard, trying to keep you entertained and engaged, and we want to hear from you as well. So hit us up on the official Yanks Go Yard Twitter account at YanksGoYardFS. Until then, enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Next week, we'll have a regular schedule. Monday, 2 p.m., Thursday, 2 p.m., live stream right here. Nothing else conflicting. We're not going to let it happen.
That's true. We will see ya next week. Goodbye, everybody.